So you're saying, in the effort to elevate women throughout society, men have been largely left behind in a lot of ways. What do you think is the message that a lot of men should be hearing in the world? What can we do to support men, Destiny?
Oh man, here we go. Okay.
I got my prescription whenever you're
Yeah,
ready.
that's fine. Okay. Yeah, so this is where I'll fight against a lot of like the red pill spaces, right? So I think that the number one explainer for women's success is women historically have been very feminine because they're females and biology and blah, 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 blah. One of the things that women have done over the past like few decades is they've incorporated successfully a lot of aspects of masculinity into their character that we previously thought weren't possible. We didn't think that women would excel at school. We didn't think that women could participate in certain STEM fields. We didn't think that women could start to make all the gains in a lot of these peripheral industries that they started to. And for a lot of places where they have, right? So places like being like lawyers and stuff, not necessarily in STEM, although that's starting. So as that's happened, as women have made those gains in masculinity, we're kind of like looking at men. Men have basically, they're kind of still masculine, but we haven't worked on kind of like rounding out like how men navigate the world at all, which would probably be the incorporation of some feminine features. So being emotionally intelligent, being able to communicate with people on a better level, having some level of like measured control of themselves.
Would probably decrease the suicide rates among men.
Oh,
Potentially, yeah.
Absolutely.
So what we've done is we've kind of like shit on men completely. So the
Yeah.
left will say like, men, figure it out. And then the red pill comes in and it's like, you need to be even more masculine. But it's like, the reality is 50, 60, 70 years ago, if you wanted a wife, all you needed was a paycheck because she's not going to school and she's not working.
Yeah.
Now
You
that
don't
they're going
need
to
that
school and
anymore.
working, you got to have more. What's the value proposition for a woman to get into a relationship? It can't just be that you have a job anymore.
I just wanted to add, you're absolutely right.
On a
I do
roll.
think that men are like, I don't want to say oppressed, but yeah, pretty much nowadays they are. Like you see people saying men ain't shit, men ain't that. And you wonder why the suicide rates are so high because we don't give the same amount of support to men as we do to women. There's women's support groups, there's women this, women that, but we need to focus on men as well.
That's true, but
That's what he's
arguably
saying.
one of the
Yeah, that's
impediments
what I'm saying.
to bring up the patriarchy thing, one of the impediments to that I think is this idea of like what is an ideal man or what is a man supposed to be? Because suicide rates for men have always been high, but so have things like violent crime rates, so have things like homicide rates, so have things like incarceration rates. And it's not just because the judges are unfair. In some cases they are. It's because men are the ones that are out in the streets like getting work done when shit is falling
I
apart.
think Andrew Tate is the response too, because like,
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
he's 1,000%. Like that's why like during World War II, like everybody suddenly voted someone into power, right? Because he was fucking very extreme on the other side of things. So I think he's just representing a gigantic vacuum that's needed because you know, I left America in 2012, right? I haven't lived here consistently since like, you know, I lived here for like 11 months, 2016, and I saw enough writing on the wall to get the fuck out of here. But when I come back to America, it's just like consistently this like, how can we put more accountability on men and how can we take more accountability away from women? And then like the mainstream media, the music, the video games, like you're in the gaming industry too, you know, like everything is just like piling on to shit on men and like endlessly jerk off women. And guys kind of just like, all right, like it's kind of gotten to this point where it's fucking ridiculous. Like guys absolutely have issues too, but men are just not going to sit around and cry and feel sorry for themselves. But women will, 9 times out of 10, they will do that. You know what I mean?
I mean, men do that too.
They will, but I agree with you, but there's not a social stigma around men crying about the bullshit
true,
in their
because
life.
sometimes instead of crying, they just kill themselves, right?
I want
Fair play
Yeah.
compared to women, you know what I mean? So that's why I think this Tate thing is like it's a giant pendulum swing back.
It is,
It
but
is,
the
it
only
is.
the only
Jonathan
issue.
and-
Or go ahead.
Jonathan and Stephen, I want to get back to the original question. Asking in terms of your prescription to help support men better in our society so we can restore male
I have
greatness. I know. And I also want to hear from John on this too. We can go Stephen, John, and then John. You mentioned better emotional tools for men. You also mentioned men. It needs to be clarified what men are bringing to the table beyond just a paycheck, because now that we're past the 1950s, as you were saying, that's not enough of a value proposition. So that needs to be clarified. What else would you say needs to be added to the equation to best support men?
I feel like the spaces that are designed right now for men, I'll broadly say like the manosphere, are not doing a good job. So the only space, if you are a man and you're looking for support, and then you come to these spaces, personally, I feel like they give like some of the worst advice in terms of like how to succeed, right? I'm going to be really cringe here, and I'm going to borrow from Ben Shapiro. I think he has like 3 classic
Beta,
points.
not a high value man.
Yeah, I think he has 3 classic points for have at least escaping poverty. I believe 1 is don't have a kid before you're married.
Facts.
I think 2 is graduate high school, and I think 3 was get a job, wasn't it? Was that number 3? But these are like really, really
Common
basic
sense
things.
indicators, for
Yeah.
sure.
And I feel like, so for instance, when I come to Red Pill spaces, something that's really, in my opinion, really sad is the constant shunning of like college and higher education.
Yeah.
Because that is when you look at all of the successful people. I don't know if I can say it. But like in these red pill spaces, there's a lot of like wealthy controllers of society that people are like, oh, these guys run everything. They're doing everything, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, okay, well, fine. Let's say they do that. Well, what do they do with their kids? Their kids are like a guy whose name is Goldstein. He's not training his kid to be the best drop shipper, okay? He's not training his kid to get into crypto. He's sending his kid to the best fucking universities in the world to get a high quality education, to graduate and do shit with his life. And it feels like in these spaces, we demonize the out of college education. Now, if you want to say that there are things like apprenticeships or going into trades, which is good, I fully agree with that 100%. But oh my God, if there's like one piece of advice I can impart that you would care that a blue-haired cuck would tell you online, if you're a man and you're trying to make it in the world, you are way better off becoming an electrician or a plumber if you don't want to go to college, because school, I flunked out of school, okay? I understand school, okay? Or I quit school, right? If you want to do that, at least pick up a trade. Don't try to make it in this fucking crypto drop shipping world, because you're not going to make it.
Based recommendation of the trades. Give me some.
Thanks,
I learned a couple years ago that like if a young guy wants to get into welding, for example, he can be making over $120,000 a year.
2 years.
From the start of his education, 2 years into it, he can be making six figures.
Yeah.
And like, there's not enough of that being preached. So I completely
And you don't
agree.
see, and the problem too is that when it comes to crypto, you can see all the winners. You don't see all the losers,
which
okay?
are huge, like 90%
Yeah.
plus.
And even a lot of the winners eventually become losers.
Yeah.
Did you ever see? I don't want to call anybody in particular. I'm so sorry, but like
Call
one
him
of the
out, call him
funniest. Do you remember when Boogie 2988?
Yeah.
He made a video about how happy he was that a huge crypto investment paid off. Was it 2 months or was it a year later or whatever? He was like, guys, listen up. I'm selling the Tesla. Because my shit got fucked. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
you got rugged.
I think it doesn't help that. Well, I love Andrew.
Hold
Tate,
on.
but-
He's been waiting
yeah,
to speak.
sorry.
I want to go to him.
John.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, my thing is I run something called the Masculine Empowerment Network, right? MEN. And so I tell guys like
It's a good name.
The general, the rule of life that a man should focus on, I call the core four, which is make money, make muscles, learn game, and hold frame. That's my prescription. I know like, you don't like the general red pill prescription. I'm like, the red pill's kind of like adopted me as one of their spokespeople, but I'm just my own thing. And I will say to the red pill community too, which camera is it? This one? I don't know. That one? that one right there.
Yeah.
So I will say this in Destiny's defense, guys, for you guys that are red pill and jumping on Destiny's fucking, back for bullshit. He's his own man. He's made his own money, and he's decided to live his own way of life. If that's not red pill, I don't know what to say it is, because he's not like a slave to the system. He has his own things, and that you guys have to learn to like be okay with encountering people in life who don't agree with the way you live. And I think like, it's pretty obvious, like you're clearly, if we were to categorize it like a high value man, like objectively speaking, I mean, no, I know. I'm talking to the chat, not you. You already know this, but like multiple women having, autonomy, having a good amount of financial income. So anyways, going back to the thing, my thing is just simply this. I tell them the exact same thing you say. I say, make money, which is have a career or skill that will ideally lead you to six figures at some point down the road within 5 to 7 years. Make muscles, which is basically just don't be fat. I mean, everybody in America is so fucking fat. Blows my mind every time I come back here.
Don't be fat.
Don't be
lift.
fat.
Are you telling you're meant to
Bro,
lift?
and also
So-
even you don't
Chase,
have to
can we
lift,
see the
just like
tries?
walk 30 minutes a day. Anything to get you out of your house.
So right, but the general message is don't
Walk.
be fat, which
Sure.
is not okay because biologically speaking, that's just terrible for you, right?
Sure.
Learn game is just understanding the difference between a good woman who is like genuinely interested in you and a woman who has, other ulterior motives for you, which, and now today, those are very, common. And then hold frame, which is basically a guy needs to understand the concept of boundaries, because I think a lot of men and women don't have an idea of the concept of boundaries. I found out about the concept of boundaries when I was 35. I'm 37 now, and I wish I could understand what boundaries were, and then more importantly, the enforcement of those boundaries as well. So that's what I tell guys to focus on the core four: make money, make muscles, learn game, hold frame, money, muscles, game, frame. That's my prescription. I don't know if you disagree with it, but that's my solution that I run for this, because I have a lot of guys too. I have people within the Masculine Empowerment Network that teach these guys how to code, teach these guys how to get jobs in cybersecurity, teach them about there are viable options in the trades. Like, for example, power linemen. Like within 10 years, like America's going to be really fucking shit out of luck when it comes to power linemen. Now, these jobs can get you up to $200,000
Is it power
a year.
alignment?
Power linemen. These are the guys who climb
Power linemen.
Power linemen,
The dudes
yeah.
taking care of the power lines. Gotcha.
Exactly, And these jobs can get you to 200,000 with under 5 years. You know what I mean? Because this whole influencer bullshit, like I'm a creator, I'm this, I'm a fucking crypto millionaire. No, you're not.
People will say shit like the West is falling and like every kid wants to be a YouTuber, and you're like, don't be a YouTuber, be a drop
Yeah,
shipper.
exactly. So like, do you like from what I know it's a very TLDR prescription I give you, but that's my perspective on
Yeah,
this.
sure. So like I would agree with the 4, but what we're probably going to fight is like what you mean by 3 and 4. Like learn, game, hold frame are going to be the things that we disagree. So like for instance, when you talk about like the importance of boundaries, I would argue, and I don't want to go back and forth too much because I know you want to say something. I would argue that like a boundary that I would consider to be very strange is like the big push in some of these spaces for like one-sided open relationships.
Yeah.
That seems like something that is like I don't think I would ever advocate for my audience to try to pursue
But
something
you
like
do
that.
realize there are women that are okay with that.
I mean, and there are men that are okay getting fucked in the ass, but we wouldn't say that like everybody should be homosexual, right?
But I mean, I'm just
Is
saying
it
a boundary is a
degenerate?
boundary. A boundary is a boundary. And I'm just saying that.
Depends on if you've had an enema first.
I don't think those sort of relationships is going to be successful in most cases.
What is
so
not?
I don't think those sort of relationships is going to be successful in those.
But the
cases,
I
right?
mean, it's going to have a higher success relationship than being in an open relationship, because open relationships, especially when the woman is out there sleeping around, have a 92% failure rate.
Yeah, but what is the failure rate for one-ended open relationships?
I don't know.
Yeah, probably really high
I don't
too,
know,
right?
but
Just seems
I will say men have been doing that a lot since the beginning
will
of
say-
like
Hey,
time.
wait,
Maybe they
real
should
quick.
be ashamed of it at least.
What?
Wait,
If
what do
it's
you
a
say?
one-sided open relationship, maybe it should be like something considered shameful and not something that's promoted.
Yeah, I just, the my biggest issue, and this is maybe my feminist coming out, is I think a big issue today is asymmetry in relationships, pushing
Makes
for
you feel
asymmetry.
trapped if you're a woman.
Yeah, and
if you're
pushing-
if you can't do things like you, let's say that you
But
say
regular-
I'm not okay with an open relationship on just your side, and I say okay, but in that case I'm gonna dump you, and she doesn't have a job, she doesn't have like any stability, and she
That's
just feels like she needs to,
hyper
like, keep-
extreme. I don't think
I feel like this is
people
a lot
people
of
are not going to
cases.
get in a relationship like and then kind of disclose that later after they're married, and she's fully dependent on the guy. She's quit her job.
It seems
it's got
to
to
bring
that
things,
point.
It's just-
well, also to bring things around though, that's one of the issues is what Tate kind of did, right? Is I love you, come to Romania, we're gonna get married, we're gonna be a couple,
So,
we're gonna do things, and then I know you want to comment on it, but I'm saying that was kind of
I
what he-
don't.
yeah.
I'm not a big fan of telling a woman to move to another country and quit her job and be fully dependent on me in a manipulative standpoint. I don't do that.
I just wanted to say, like, I'm not trying to be a pick-me, but I'm just saying that as a woman, I do want to support a man no matter what. Like, no matter what he chooses to do, whether it be drop shipping as unsuccessful as he might be, I want to be there every step of the way. However, I do think that people should also, like women themselves, should try to get jobs to help support the family, to help support everyone else. Because you don't want to end up like you're saying, like how Tate is just bringing women in and then like he just dumps them and then they have
True.
nothing else to
But
do.
a lot
will-
of these men kind of want to have like a wife at home with kids that's taking care of the kids like full time.
Yeah, but at the same
there's
time,
like no
taking-
space to have a job.
At the same time, taking care of the kids and taking in the man does involve trying to find financial stuff for yourself, trying to fund it, trying to like make, money,
yeah,
make a living.
I'm for it. I think
That's
there
a
should
part
be
of
like
it.
equal
Would
like, when
you
it comes to work and
have
stuff.
John go, then I have to get caught up on donations because we're really behind. So
John, what do we need to do to make men great again, bro?
Tell us
That's a
how
great
Jesus is
question.
the path to salvation. Let's
There's
go.
there's a lot there. I think we've spoken a lot this evening about this idea of progress, particularly with women. I think that the word connotes good, but I don't think it's been good. I mean, the woman, or I should say, maybe the profile of the person in this country who is supposedly she who has benefited the most from all the liberation and progress that women have made would probably be like a single working woman, middle aged with no children. She's been liberated from the constraints of biology, be that her bearing children. She's been liberated from the constraints of a husband having to provide for her. She's a career woman. She's working. She doesn't need all that, no need for a man or anything like that. But that also happens to be the profile of the person in this country who's the most likely to be taking SSRIs. And I think there's something to be said about that. I also think that it's easier for women to adapt to, like Stephen said, more masculine aspects of society because they're naturally, because of biology, more agreeable and more socialized. So I think it's easier to fit them into that framework. I don't think you can do the same with men. If you look at like suicide rates with men, for example, they're at the highest they've ever been, broadly speaking, but we don't enforce those standards of masculinity like we would have in the 1950s, for example, where probably you had the strictest enforcement of those ideas of like what a man should be, how he should act, things like that, but men weren't themselves at the rates that they are now. So I think that, and I think the youngest guy here, I'm 23. I remember being in elementary school, they started bringing in guidance counselors. There was all this talk about boys needing to express their feelings more, boys need to do this. You see it everywhere throughout society, but for some reason that doesn't quite catch on. But when someone comes along like an Andrew Tate, who I agree with pretty much everything you said about him, or even like a Jordan Peterson, who basically took fatherly advice and delivered it through a lens of like Jungian psychology, it's like this rapid organic popularity. People literally go to like Jordan Peterson events with with like tears in their eyes, thanking this guy for telling them how to basically like be a vaguely responsible man. So I don't think the answer is to take men and make them more androgynous and maybe adapt to a more androgynous frame of society. I think you need to make men be men again, and resultantly I think women need to be like women again, because I don't think women are happy, I don't think men are happy, and I don't think that they experience depression the same way. Women tend to experience depression in a much more environmental sense, meaning they are directly affected by their environment. If they're unhappy, I think that makes them depressed. Men experience depression when there's no way out of that environment. I think that we are perfectly okay with going through something, but if we don't see a way out because of all the progress that women have made, we've had to tilt the scale so you guys have a greater advantage in pretty much every aspect of life, and men just don't see that light at the end of the tunnel. And that's why we just kill ourselves. That's why, the common thing is like, well, yeah, men are more likely to kill themselves, but women are more likely to attempt it. Okay, well, why would that be? Because women are like, I'm upset, and men are just like, yeah, I'm not going to get out of this, and they like their head off or something. And I think that speaks to the differences in our like natural predispositions as men and as women, and I think that we need to acknowledge that for what it is and restore what would be considered a more traditional set of gender roles in society.
I think
So
just on real quick, the issue that I have with that, without even getting into the pros and cons of everything, is everything you said will never come to fruition. This is my biggest issue with
Ye
TradCon
of little
advice.
faith.
The
Can't-
problem is that you're
can't
never
be
getting
back.
rid of birth control, because women don't want to go back to that, and most men probably wouldn't even accept that, and you're never taking women out of the workforce and education, right? For as much as you talk about like traditional stuff has only benefited like the miserable middle-aged woman, the woman to your left that's working on Tim Pool's show has largely benefited from feminism, because women are taken seriously in terms of having political opinions even at young ages. So I mean, like,
Right.
I don't think we're ever going back to a world where like women don't have reproductive control and women aren't allowed to go to school and enter the workforce anymore.
I would agree with you, I think, if I shared your worldview, in that you seem to have a much more positive or maybe optimistic view of like where our country is headed, where I'm sure those of us on this side of the table think like collapse is imminent. So I think that if and when that happens, which I don't think a collapse would happen in the way that people like to fantasize about, where there's like civil war and
Yeah, but like, who would
violence.
you model ourselves after? Like, who do you think's doing better than us right now?
I think that it's
Donald
going
Trump.
to reach a point where
Really? Come on. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it'll reach a point where the cultural entropy will reach a state where people want to do away with these ideas. Like you mentioned, for example, things are going like pretty well if our biggest problem is that like men want to use the women's restroom or vice versa. I think that things get a lot worse than that, where those problems would be abandoned and we return to tradition, so to speak. But I do think it is a very real problem, because yeah, it's one thing if like a guy wants to use a girl's bathroom, but that is like one facet of the whole issue, which is like we are redefining, sex and gender. And maybe Russia is a crappy country, but their descendants are still going to be Russians, and they're still going to have, access to normal children. Whereas in this country, I might not be, facing a land war, but I don't know that my children aren't going to be brainwashed by the popular culture to mutilating their genitalia. I certainly don't have my heritage anymore. I certainly am not able to be proud of my history. So if I don't even have my future, it's like, is this really a great country because I have reasonable access to like food, sex, entertainment? Like, no. I mean, these countries I think are better in a more
I think this country produces
historic
awesome
sense.
things, like even today. I think things like this podcast are evidence of it. Russia's like heritage is like circle jerking themselves over World War II, where they were the defenders against Nazism. So they weren't even aggressors against it, right? America is the country that ended, and the West is largely who won against World War II, against Hitler. The only reason the Soviets killed so many people is because the Nazis tried to invade their homeland. When you look at like in Russia, no offense to Russia, economically that country is not doing too well.
Yeah.
Socially, that country has a ton of problems.
Because the empire collapsed. I mean,
Well, yeah, sure. The empire collapsed, and even internally, like there are a ton of issues that Russia deals
Sure.
with. But like, sure, like Putin can come out and give like what are really like even right-wing American talking points of like, the in the West are destroying everything. And the jokes in the beginning of the Ukrainian war were literally like, are your trans soldiers going to be defeating our proud, Russian ethnic persons? And now you've got like Russian dudes who are like committing in ditches because now these trans Russian soldiers are like flying drones and dropping grenades on them, right? And I mean, you've got like the archetypical like trans Ukrainian dropping fucking grenades on like two Russians giving each other head in like a fucking bunker somewhere, and it's like, what's actually happening here? I don't disagree that there are problems, and listen, okay, I'll say it here. I'm welcoming a little bit of a snapback on some shit, because there are some things in this country that are fucking insane, okay?
Yeah.
A lot of the transitions
Talk
have
about
gotten
that,
really
'cause
crazy,
everybody
right?
thinks you
I
side for the
no,
crazy
no.
stuff.
Nobody thinks that, because I...
No, casual viewer.
Maybe,
Casual
but
viewers.
I'm literally banned on Twitch permanently that I streamed up for 12
I love it.
years.
I love
because
it.
I
Why?
talk about because I was against some of the trans athlete stuff, right? And I got
Based.
involved in. But I'm just saying that, like,
Based.
so I'm not saying that a snapback is necessarily wrong, but like, it's still moving in a certain direction. Women are never, ever going to give up everything they've got. Nobody wants to give up that much autonomy and freedom.
Well, not
you are
voluntarily.
presupposing that we would ask them permission before we would simply.
Well,
like,
okay, so
remove
maybe it's something.
these
Okay,
types of
sorry. go
I
ahead,
think
Frank.
women would literally like
It would be if you want civil war.
We took
I
away
think
your
you would
right
get
to an
a civil
abortion, and you
war.
like cried about it outside of
Do you
buildings when the police like blocked you off, and then you
Have
basically
you
went
not
back
seen
to your
the
life.
upsurge of like legislation and women getting like politically active because of
Do you
that?
think if
It's
there
like
were a-
politicized
Did you not see the last
nagging.
midterms?
It's like this is not
Do you think
threatening.
that
Do
if
not
there
think
were a
voting
civil war
matters?
between men
No,
and
I don't,
women,
absolutely
that
not.
women
well,
would
that's where
win?
you-
I
Women
think-
would
disagree.
absolutely win because there would be men that would side with them. In a civil war between men and women, the men are going to kill all the women and be like, we won, we did it.
You'd have like all
Then
the
those men would be like
crazy-
Sims. They'd be
Women's
like, hey,
suffrage and
knock
everything.
it off.
Women's suffrage only happened because there were men that also wanted it, right? Like the
Big
majority class,
mistake.
like men in general, there's a huge talent pool. There's a really interesting. I get a lot of emails about this, so I don't want to fucking drone on this too much. When it comes to like crazy, like weird, like people on autism, blah blah blah. There's a lot of talent there that has migrated to places like San Francisco. We make fun of it for being like capital of the world. There's a lot of programmers and a lot of talent in that pool, though, because demographically they're drawn to those types of jobs. Because a lot of times, like if you can code, you can code. They don't give a fuck if you have a dick or a vagina or if you use Z's or pronouns or whatever. If you can do the work, you can do the work. So the thing that I like about our Western society, to bring it back, is that like we have problems with how much diversity we push. I agree, but holy shit, we've been able to siphon so much fucking talent out of a lot of that diversity. Even Andrew
Right.
Tate himself is to some extent a product of like a really globalized world that is connected to so many different like ethnic and religious and cultural markets.
Yeah,
John, I definitely want to hear more from you, but I do need to just keep things moving along here. So, okay, we have a